When we begin to think about architectural styles in Western Pennsylvania, from about the 1930s until more recently, there is a very important distinction to understand. Modern, with a lowercase m, refers to the time period beginning in the late 1880s and 90s. Modern and modernist, with a capital M, refers to architecture with a certain set of characteristics. So then capital M modern architecture originated in the 1920s in Western Europe and was a reaction against traditional architecture and dominant Western culture. World War I was a major instigator of this change. The mechanization of war, unprecedented loss of life, and political and imperial corruption driving the war thoroughly crushed many architects' belief in the idea that humans are rational, intellectually advanced, and capable of solving differences in a reasoned manner. This is a great example demonstrating how architecture reflects the cultural, social, and political shifts in our world. In architecture, this break with tradition took the form of buildings that exhibited some or many of the following characteristics: the absence of applied ornament, flat surfaces, the extensive use of windows to allow for lots of light, modern materials, thin, plain columns, and an independent relationship between facade and interior, meaning that you couldn't read a building's layout simply by looking at its facade. The big form givers in modern European architecture were Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus in Germany, Le Corbusier or Corbu, who was Swiss and practiced in France, and Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, also German. Quite a number of significant modern architects like these fled Europe during the rise of Nazism in the 1930s. Their teachings completely transformed American architectural education. In Pittsburgh, the most famous example of modern architecture is Mies' Mellon Hall of Science on Duquesne University's campus. Using new materials, Mies pushed what was possible in building design. By taking away ornamentation, which sometimes covered up building errors, the building has a sleek, pared-back design. These words make me think of another architect practicing at this time, Frank Lloyd Wright. Even though Frank Lloyd Wright's work differed from other modern architects, it was without question modern in the sense that he broke with tradition, used new materials, created new types, and treated typical architectural elements differently. Perhaps his most famous example is Fallingwater, located outside of Pittsburgh in the Laurel Highlands. The next 20th century style of significance in Western Pennsylvania is known as the International style. By the time new building construction had begun again after World War II, America had pretty much established itself as a world leader both economically and politically, so the values reflected in modern design were no longer as of great importance in our capitalist society. Using modernism as a base, American buildings in the International style adapted. For example, corporate buildings also started becoming advertisements. In Pittsburgh, the old Alcoa headquarters on 6th Avenue used the company product aluminum in its construction and is the first building in the world to be clad in all aluminum. Also, the IBM building, today's United Steelworkers building, was finished in 1963 using an entirely new structural system to reflect IBM's new industry. The Gateway Center buildings, Mellon Hall, all are great examples of 1960s modernist buildings. The U.S. Steel Building is a great example of late modernism. The Giovannetti House is also an interesting example in Pittsburgh of residential modernism. It is small but highly sculptural and abstract. Both modernism and its derivative, the International style, remained popular in America well into the 1960s and beyond because it was really good at telegraphing America's new power and influence. However, during the post-war years, there was a growing contingent of architects and people in general who disliked modernism and the International style because they thought it cold, lacking in imagination, and stifling in its repetitiveness. This rejection of modernism coalesced into a movement that has since become known as postmodernism. Postmodernism was founded by documents such as architect Robert Venturi's Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture, published in the late 1960s. The movement advocated for thinking in terms of both and not either or, and where modernism completely dispensed with history, some architecture schools didn't even teach architectural history during modernism's heyday. Postmodernism called for the restoration of historical references. Postmodern architects also believed that there was nothing wrong with messiness, For them, the austerity of modernism was a sort of false perfection, and they thought that architecture should be fun, which is why postmodern buildings often have a whimsical quality that is considered to be a relief from modernism. In Western Pennsylvania, some of the best examples of postmodern architecture are right in downtown Pittsburgh. There is the Pittsburgh Plate and Glass Company that wanted to build a building to show off part of its business, glass, so PPG was created. PPG Place's main tower was inspired by the Cathedral of Learning in Oakland, and the series of towers around it were inspired by H.H. Richardson's Allegheny County Courthouse and Jail. Using historic architectural references to inform design like PPG Place was a hallmark of postmodern design. Additionally, in Pittsburgh, there's the O'Reilly Theater, Theater Square, and Katz Plaza, all in Pittsburgh's cultural district. They are local examples of postmodern architecture and urban design as well. As you can see, Western Pennsylvania is a wonderful microcosm of excellent landmark architecture, with diverse styles spanning many years and a variety of cultures. Today, we continue to add to our built environment, always making sure to save the best of the past to inform our future. This series of videos were meant to give you a brief and general overview of architectural styles existing in Western Pennsylvania. Remembering even some of them can help us place different buildings into the historic period in which they belong, as well as help us appreciate just how long people have been using and taking care of the buildings in our region.